Hey, Mary. Hello.
Okay, well, I can't right now. I'm watching, attending a meeting on Zoom. Okay. Okay. It might be tomorrow because it might be late. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, scan that with your phone. He's like my little brother, like, yes. So I can follow on. We're not even doing those anymore.
Welcome everybody tonight to our weekly candidates night. I'm Mayor Wendy Prey, and I just want you to know that we are, well, you know this already, but I want to speak for all of us in saying how grateful we all are to live in a country where we are free to participate in the role of government. And we are very blessed this year in our city to have a good variety of candidates that all love the city. And we are lucky to have people that are ready, willing, and able to serve. So let's take tonight to get to know them better. And I'm looking forward to this opportunity. We're going to begin with Pledge of Allegiance. Jody, did you ask somebody to, Zach, can I put you on the spot and ask you to lead us in the pledge? Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we are going to get started quickly because we don't want to take any more time for our candidates than we must. We are very grateful tonight to have moderator Senator Kirk Bramble has come to moderate for us tonight. He is a member of the Utah State Senate, and he represents District 16. What areas is that? I'm sorry to expose my ignorance.
District 16, I represent most of the city of Provo, a portion of the city of Orem, and I represent rural going up to Wallsburg in Wasatch County.
So he assumed office in 2001, and his current term will end the end of 2024. He attended the University of Notre Dame and then went on to earn his BS in accounting and finance from Brigham Young University. Then he received his MS in accounting and tax from Brigham University, and he's a certified public accountant. He and his wife are the parents of 6 children and have 6 wonderful grandchildren. 16.
2 more coming.
Oh, wow. So typo. I was gonna say, oh, we're like totally the same, but no, I only have 6. So that's wonderful, grandchildren. He and his family enjoy hot air ballooning, scuba diving, motorcycle touring, running, backpacking, fishing, and hunting. They also enjoy family time together at Lake Powell. Senator Bramble is known for listening to his neighbors and constituents. He has an open door policy and has introduced numerous bills at the request of his constituents. He tackles difficult issues like preserving the caucus system, protecting unborn children, fighting federal overreach, and preserving local control for education. He's also a champion of transparency in government, passing multiple bills that help citizens access important information. So thank you, and a good warm welcome to Kurt Bramble. Now,
Can I take just a moment? Can you guys hear me in the back, or do I need? I'll use the mic. I want to take just a minute at the beginning of this event this evening. Yesterday, we had a committee hearing that could have been highly contentious. It was about President Biden's mandate on vaccines and testing, and citizens it's touching a nerve with citizens. The most important thing that happened yesterday was everyone that was in that committee. We had over 700 people show up at the Capitol for this very contentious, emotional committee meeting. Everyone recognized that our constitutional right to speak and to not be shamed, not be shouted down, whatever, the ability to address government, the ability to have a civil discourse in the public square is critical. So I know there's a lot of emotional issues in a campaign. I've been through 7 of them, okay? The best thing you guys can do tonight for your community is to respect the candidates, respect each other, and to let the candidates speak, to not interrupt them, to not shout over them, to not disrupt the meeting tonight. Because this is our process. These folks you're going to elect, they're going to run the affairs of your city, and you really need to hear what their positions are, what their philosophies are, what their values are. We're going to try to get to that. But it's up to everyone in this room to maintain that respect and that decorum so that we can do it in a dignified manner, because the candidates deserve it. But more important, every citizen deserves to hear those candidates before you cast the vote. So thank you for letting me take a minute.
thank you, Senator Bramble. Okay, this is how we're going to operate tonight. We're going to start with the mayoral candidates, and we're going to give them each. They'll each be given 2 minutes to give an introduction statement. Then we will be taking questions, and we're using a Slido technology. And I don't know where Chloe went. Oh, there. She's like all blended into the. Chloe is going to run the Slido things for us.
I don't think we're going to be doing that.
Oh, are we not?
We're not.
Okay.
I've gone through the questions. There's a number of really, really good questions. Ladies and gentlemen, there's a number of really good questions that have been posed. There are also a number of very direct questions that, as a moderator, seem to be a bit toxic. Certainly, any candidate should be able to respond to those questions one-on-one. But when you have a very direct attack type question to a candidate, that's more appropriate for one-on-one discussion. This isn't a witch hunt to any one candidate. And not coming from Woodland Hills, I don't know where the sentiments are with any of the candidates. And so it will be an unbiased and balanced set of questions. But because of that, we're not going to go to the slide L.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for learning on your feet. We love that. Okay, so then the moderator will give the questions, and he will determine how the amount of time that each candidate will have to respond. And then at the end, each candidate will have two more minutes to close their remarks. So we'll do the mayoral candidates, and then we'll do the city council candidates after that. So let's get the candidates for mayor. The 3 of you, would you like to come up here? We've got Ben Hilliard, Mike Lauritsen, and Brent Winder, who I know really well. I can't remember my kids' names either, so. All right. When you can talk to Kurt, he's moderating tonight, so,
No.
no, we're, sorry, Darren, this is not, it's inappropriate right now. We appreciate it. This is Darren Bergen. He really wants to speak, but we told him this isn't the venue for that because this is a candidate.
The Declaration of Rights in the state constitution says section 17, all
Politely.
Municipal code, there's an election code. This is completely consistent with state code, which is completely consistent and authorized by the state constitution.
and we'll let the courts decide.
Okay. Great. So let's get started. The first question I have, oh, 2 minutes, I'm sorry. No, we have to go to introduction.
Going outside order.
Yeah, no, they have the floor. Okay, did they start? Do you have an order that you're starting? Was it alphabetical?
Is that our first name or last? I guess that's me either way, right?
Go ahead, sorry.
Hi, my name is Ben Hilliard and I'm running for mayor. When we moved here, my wife and I knew that this was the place for us. Where we wanted to raise our family, where we wanted to meet our neighbors and our life-loving friends, where we would give of ourselves to help and serve this wonderful community. Throughout my life, there's been a few landmark memories that kind of crystallized in my mind. When I was a little boy, my father one day came home from work and he taped 3 crisp dollar bills on the fridge, and underneath those dollar bills, he put a poem. And he said, anybody who gets that memorized by the end of the week gets their dollar bill. That poem went like this: there is no chance, no fate, no destiny that can circumvent, hinder, or control the firm resolve of a determined soul. Throughout my life, this poem has become my mantra. I have found that there is very little that I cannot achieve when I put my mind to it, or bring the people I need to make it happen. This was it. This was my mantra all the way through my mission and then into college. While in college, I was recruited by a dear friend who now actually also lives in the city, to work for the Shingo Prize at Utah State University, an organization that assesses international organizations on their degree of operational excellence and cultural transformation. While there, and before I was even graduated from college, I was recruited by JK Associates, a national consultancy, to coach and train executives and their staff on how to make incremental changes to transform cultures and create excellence. Over the past year and a half, I have been nudged and prodded by my neighbors to run for mayor, to bring my years of education, leadership, and administrative experience to help bring the amazing city that I love to an excellent city that we can become. I'm looking forward to answering your questions and earning your support today. All I ask is for your vote for the person you believe will lead our city, unite our city, and ensure we can stay the great community that we are and even get a little bit better. Thank you.
We have a time marker when you start hearing that beep, that your time is up, okay? And we don't want to be rude up here, but when it starts ringing, your time is up.
My name's Mike Barrett. My wife and I came to Woodland Hills in 2003. I first owned property in Woodland Hills in 1975. Since that time, we have seen all kinds of volunteer efforts in the city. We've seen firemen, committees, councils. I consider the mayor and the council as volunteers, even though they get a token. Volunteerism has been at the center of what's happened in the city. And I'm grateful for all of them. And we started just after we got here into the same vein. There used to be a ditch down Woodland Hills Drive, and that was our Monday night activity, to go weed the ditch. And we have since taken on the roundabout, the mailboxes, the city office building, the grass at the park. We've helped with the mediation project to get in volunteers. We've helped with the codification project, spending many, many hours going over ordinances and comparing them to help the city to get a good product. We love the city. We appreciate the opportunity to serve the city. And I'm hoping that I'll have the opportunity to do that as mayor.
Good evening. My name is Brent Winder. My wife Monica and I have lived in Woodland Hills for a little over 16 years. We moved here from Sandy with our then small children, seeking a Tom Sawyer lifestyle with open spaces, trees, mountains, and a hint of nature. I vaguely entertained the idea of running for city council at some point in the future, but when I was recently approached by a few people, including our current mayor, Wendy Prey, and asked if I would consider running for mayor, I thought this might be a good way for me to give back to the community we have dearly loved all these years. With the departure of our two youngest daughters on missions and no small children at home, the timing seemed right, and so here I am. Professionally, I'm an attorney. For going on 21 years, I have practiced law at Jones Waldo, one of Utah's oldest, largest, and most prestigious law firms. My job, in its most fundamental sense, is helping people solve their legal problems. Beyond solving problems, my work is inherently adversarial. I don't mean that in the sense of being disagreeable, but I am obliged to work in an environment where my legal opponents are looking to exploit any missteps they can argue I made. Because of that, I have become accustomed to argument and even confrontation without becoming easily rattled or defensive. My legal training also allows me to consider and appreciate other points of view, even if I disagree with them. My background has given me well-developed communication skills and a foundational understanding of the role of government and its constitutional and statutory framework. Aside from my professional experience, I believe that I work well with others. I have served on the Board of Adjustment for the past 3 years in some of the most unique and challenging matters it has ever faced. I've had good working relations with my fellow board members, even when we don't agree. I believe my ability to work with others in a respectful way is why I have the endorsement of our current mayor, 4 out of 5 current city council members, 4 out of 5 planning commission members, and overwhelming support from city employees. My intention, if elected, is to conscientiously make adjustments when we have made missteps, to require continued accountability and transparency, and to guard against wasteful spending. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, candidates. The first question, there's actually going to be, this is a 3-part question. We'll start with the first part, but I'm going to give you a heads up on what the second and third parts are, because we'll immediately, after you've answered the first, we'll then go to the second, and then we'll go to the third. And you'll understand when I tell you what the 3 questions are. The first one is, what are the 3 biggest issues your community is facing right now? The second one is, what will be the first item on your agenda if elected? And the third question is, how will you accomplish that item that you say is first on your agenda to accomplish? So the first one is, what are the top three things that you see facing the Woodland Hills? Second, what is the first item you're going to tackle as mayor? And third, how are you going to accomplish it? So we'll start with that first one. I want you to be thinking about what the follow-ups are going to be rather than catching you off unawares. So the first question, what are the three biggest issues facing Woodland Hills right now? Let's start at this end, and we'll just go down. And we'll give each of you 2 minutes to answer the first question, 2 minutes for the second question, 2 minutes for the third question, because these are not meant to be bumper sticker. They're meant to get folks thinking about what you really represent if you're elected.
As I've gone around visiting with citizens in the community, I've heard various answers to that question, but there are some that I've heard consistently. Tax increases are the way we do tax increases, whether we need tax increases, how we do budgeting, how that's made clear to the citizens so that they can understand it and feel like they're actually participating in the process. Water bills. I know, the water bills have been, I think, hit everybody this year. I've seen people cutting out parts of their grass because they can't afford the water on the grass that they have. So those are the three major issues. But under all of that is a confidence issue because of the legal problems that have surfaced in the city. I think there is a feeling of division, and that's something that needs to be addressed too.
In speaking with others, and based on my own personal experiences here, the three biggest issues that I see, and maybe I shouldn't use the city Facebook page as a gauge for these problems, but it is at least to some extent a reflection of them. But I would say that in my opinion, there's certainly some issues with concerns about transparency. There are some issues about some concerns with accountability. And then there is a problem with unity, or at least the perception of unity. So I don't know that there, and I know this is part B of the question, I don't know that they're necessarily easy answers. I don't know that they're answers that even if elected, any of us could offer in that respect, other than to try to lead by example. But I would say those are the three that I would consider key.
I like going last because then I can learn from all of them. For me, I feel like one of the things that I also too hear as I've been speaking to many of you is one, fiscal transparency, right? Not necessarily are we spending money wisely, but there is a great deal of ignorance as to how we're spending those funds. We want more clarity around that. Number two for me is unity, right? We have to be able to re-knit back together. 3 years ago, our poor mountain was on fire. And it brought us together in ways that are really only capable after such an incident. And then we were unified, we were working together, we were collaborating, we were creating, we were putting in sandbags, we were doing all those wonderful things, and it brought us together. And number three for me, let me make sure I'm checking here, is the administrative needs. Our city is the largest city in the state of Utah, as far as my investigation has been able to bring forth, that does not have a city administrator. That role falls on the mayor. And that is something I think we have some wonderful opportunities to make some great improvements.
Okay. So let's go to the middle now. So if elected, what is the first item on your agenda as mayor? You get elected, you go to office the first day. What's top on your list to accomplish?
Okay. And frankly, this does, I think, tie in with those three areas of concern that I mentioned. So with respect to accountability and transparency, I believe that the city has made great strides in that regard. I don't view this as something that requires great reformation personally. I think that if you look at some of the reports that are given, there's an abundance of information out there. So as far as like a long-term vision, I want to continue in the steps that have been taken. As a matter of, specific things that I will do once elected. I think that unity, an area where I think I can contribute considerably is I would meet with the employees and I would discuss, I've talked to Mayor Prey. There are performance evaluations that will need to be gone through. There is, assessments of what individuals that work for the city are expected to do. And, it needs to be ensured that they are doing what they're expected to do and doing it in an efficient way. But I think that it's got to be done in an area with a sense of mutual respect and trust. And I think that nobody gives their best results in an environment that is toxic. And so I think that in trying to make sure that the city employees and others in the city that I would work with feel like they're appreciated, that will make a big difference in terms of moving us forward in those areas.
Okay, Ben, specifically, you're elected, you show up for office for work the first day on the job as mayor. What's the one thing that's top on your priority list to accomplish? Because then we're going to come back and explore with each of you the specifics of how you're going to accomplish them.
But I won't go into detail now. Thank you. The first thing that I will do is the exact same thing I do with any of the organizations that I consult with. And that is I will sit down with every single employee as well as Wendy and get what we call in the industry grasping the situation. One of the things that's common with all three of us is none of us are the incumbent. We are all extremely ignorant when it comes to what really is going on from a day-to-day standpoint. And so I start with an intensive interview process.
I guess that points up what I'm feeling, and that is that going into the position, I don't know everything. And so I don't know it, and I would be open to hear. But I think communication is the key thing that I would go after. To make sure that I understand what the public wants. The reason for our government is to serve you. It's to listen to you, to protect your rights, and to take care of your needs. So to me, that comes ahead of taking care of the business in the office. But that has to happen too. Paved roads are an important part of taking care of each individual in the city, even though it's a very big administrative headache. So I think the most important thing to me, the thing I want to go after very first, is to find out what you want and make sure we're headed in the right direction.
Ben, we're going to change it up just a little bit on the microphone. So toxicity, unity, divisiveness has been a common theme in the submitted questions. It's been a common theme here tonight in terms of challenges. It's not unique to Woodland Hills. It's not unique to Utah County or the state of Utah. And it's certainly not unique to the nation. We are faced with tribalism, with partisanship, with objectifying folks that disagree with us, etc. So one of the questions that was actually posed is, and this goes right to the unity question, and I'm going to ask you how you're going to deal with the divisiveness in the political landscape today. And that's not limited to Woodland Hills, although I sense as an observer that there is some of that here. How are you going to deal with the divisiveness, and how are you going to bring the community together? Specifics on how you're going to tackle that universal problem for Woodland Hills. Put you on the spot, doesn't it?
This is great, yeah. Do you want one of these other guys to go first?
Well, you said you were given the advantage, they were going first, giving you ideas. I thought it hurt to
Listen up, you guys know.
listen, as mayor, you're gonna have to lead out.
For sure. Great question. Thank you. For me, unity is one of my deep passions. As I was explaining before, one of the things that I focus on in these different organizations as I have been able to consult with them is on cultural transformation. And that is what we need here. There's two primary ways you can shift behavior, and that is systems and numbers and metrics. Some of those systems, I know I'm going into PowerPoint mode, and please forgive me. I get into business PowerPoint mode and I get in trouble. But one of the things that united us the most when we were having the fire was the service that we came together to render in all of our common good. One of the things that we also struggle with in our city is so there was a lot of projects that need to be done. How can we all come together to make that happen? That is one of the first things that I will be bringing to the table is a service-oriented goal. Second, a lot of it is miscommunication. And mostly, especially with some of our employees, is some of them are maybe a little rougher around the edges, to whom I love dearly. And how can we help through an administrative standpoint, help protect them, but also help paint a picture or mediate between residents and the city, or residents and employees to help give them the support that they need, but through providing clear, articulated understanding to both residents and also the city and the employee to make sure that they are supported. And I think that'll both help with the unification. And lastly, it comes down to transparency. How can we get the truth out there? Nothing causes more trouble than misinformation, which creates divisiveness. Nothing causes us more problems than disinformation. And we need to be clearer on our communication coming from the city to our residents.
Thank you. Mr. Lawrenson. That's me. No, I'm mixing up the order. So I don't want you guys to like anticipate the clock, okay?
I want to get comfortable for heaven's sake. This goes back to what I was talking about before. I'm concerned that citizens need to know that they're heard. In one of my meetings with citizens, someone suggested that we have a system set up to where when someone comes and speaks at council meeting and they take their 2 minutes to give their thoughts, that there be a way of getting back with them to make sure that they get a response so that they know that they've been heard. It's been frustrating to a lot of people in the city that I've talked with, that they feel like they express concerns and they don't get quite the open ear that they would like to get to be heard, to know that what they have to contribute is important. Once you've been elected to the council or the mayor, that's not an honorary position where you just share your wisdom. It takes some work, it takes some involvement, getting to know what people want, getting to know what kind of solutions you can provide, and communicating those so people know that they're heard and have a part in their own government.
Mr. Winter, again, divisiveness, that was one of your top 3 issues. Specifics on how you would feel about or approach that in the city.
Okay, you know, I do think that when it comes to managing expectations, we start with these types of expectations. I mean, frankly, we're all roommates in this shared space, and we're not going to agree on many things. And everyone's not going to get what they want in all things, you know, and that is the challenge of any elected office, I feel, is trying to represent your constituents in a manner that at a minimum at least represents most of them in a meaningful way. As far as specific things that I think I could do if elected mayor, you know, leading by example is no small thing. I think that, you know, it's something where in terms of even, and communication has already been discussed. And so, Ben and Mike and I share, I think, a variety of common outlooks when it comes to communicating, different situations to the citizens and helping to manage those expectations as well. Because I think that, if you feel like you don't know what is happening, then it's easy to feel like you've been slighted or you've been deceived. So certainly communication is a key piece of that. And then with respect to, bringing unity in other ways, I just think that it's about trying to understand one another's points of view. And I believe that my background allows for that in a unique way.
Thank you all for being specific on that. So the next question is a non-controversial, non-divisive question. Change and growth are inevitable. How do you envision managing this change and growth? And I'm going to have follow-up questions about specifics on zoning, commercial, accessory dwelling units, density housing, and the other things that come along with growth. So let's start, Mr. Winder, with you. Change and growth are inevitable. How do you plan on addressing that as the leader, the mayor of the city?
Okay, it's interesting because I actually had a preview of that question. It was on the overhead when I came in to set up my table. And I will be honest, it's something where, as far as a vision, there aren't any real red flags that come to mind when it comes to the development of the city. I think that those who have gone before have done an exceptional job. I mean, again, there are certainly things that we could do to fine tune. Higher density developments, that's certainly something that is discussed, and it's also something that has advantages in that it brings additional revenue to the city, but it also, I think, certainly falls as a burden on more of the citizens that are down the mountain. And so I think that needs to be certainly considered. As far as a few ideas that I think would be beneficial in at least adapting and trying to preserve the way of life is, I think that maximizing green spaces is key. I mean, the one thing that sets Woodland Hills apart from virtually every other community is the fact that it is so scenic. And so I think that there are certainly things that we can do as far as a vision to maximize those green spaces, to maximize trails, to maximize our ability to enjoy the outdoors. But I do think that it also will require some compromise on all of our parts in terms of how that's managed.
Let's go to Mr. Lawrenson next. Yeah, that's right. I'm trying to be completely unpredictable.
We have a general plan. If you haven't looked at the general plan, I recommend that you do it. It's on the city's website. It addresses these things in this question specifically. Basically, it tells us that the character of Woodland Hills is going to stay the same. The intent of your public leaders is to keep things the way they are, because we know you love it the way it is. However, there are parts of the city, like down at the bottom of the city, where it's not wooded. It's not practical to put a house on 1 acre of dirt, of bare dirt. So in the general plan, you'll notice down there that there are R19 lots, a number of them. That's a higher density. That's basically a half acre lot. Just as a proposal, these are not zoned that way at this time. As a more practical way of developing the city. If you're in a 1 acre lot area, the chances of that ever changing, from my viewpoint, are pretty close to zero. It's almost a physical impossibility because we've put our houses in the middle of our 1 acre lot. So hard to fit anything else there. I think you can feel safe and secure in that. That's not the real timer. Unofficial timer. So but I think that I've gotten some good input from citizens. The Burgers giving me some great information on suggestions on things, the way we can develop to help us with our tax situation, to help provide for citizens who want to stay in Woodland Hills when they get old and don't want to have to shovel the snow anymore. That's the time.
Mr. Hilliard, you're next.
I think the key is in the question, right? What is it's inevitable. Now, what that means, I think, is very important, because I think sometimes we lose track of the idea or the fact that those parcels of land that we're talking about are owned by somebody or some developer or some company. And they really have the first right as to what they would like to potentially do with it. Now, they need to get approval. It needs to come to the city. And so we need to be accommodating to that. In the past, the Davis Ranch came to the city and with a proposal that the administration at the time did not approve and appreciate, and they moved and annexed over into Salem. And so why I bring that up is simply for the sake of those individuals have rights as well. We might not like what they want to pitch to the city, but if we can keep them and work with them and help develop it so that it looks and feels as much Woodland Hills as we feel it should, we have a vote in the outcome of what that will be. Like the question stated, the development is inevitable, unfortunately. And what we have to do is be able to work with them. Because if we cannot, they have the option and right to be able to potentially annex out. And then we already can see what Salem has granted to them. We can see what's happened on the Salem side. They're just poking in houses as fast as they can. And it is drastically going to increase our infrastructure burden. It is going to increase population up here and all of the visitors and all of the different things that potentially are concerns to many of our residents. And so what we really want to do is make sure that we are open to what they are potentially pitching and that we can create a dialogue between us and them to make it as best for us as possible.
So with growth and with that increased infrastructure and such comes costs. Cities can impose property taxes under state law. They have very little to do with property taxes. Sales tax is the primary revenue source for cities. What commercial development, what retail development would you support, and where would you support having that commercial or retail development to help offset the costs of the growth that is inevitable? Winter, let's start with you.
With respect to commercial development, frankly, that would be my last choice. I would think that that would be something, because as I have explored budgetary issues with respect to the city, I met with Chris Helvey and went through the city's budget. And Senator Bramble, as you mentioned, sales tax revenues. When I was sort of first introduced to some of these budgetary issues and discovered that home delivery actually can be a sizable source of revenue. So my personal preference would be to see if there's not a way that we can maximize our tax revenue based on, instead of going down into Spanish Fork and, ordering or buying, certain supplies, have them shipped to our home. And if it turns out that that doesn't provide sufficient revenue, it is very challenging. I don't know that there would be many commercial establishments that would want to set up shop up here. There's just not enough traffic. There's not enough, and it's not cheap, and it's inaccessible for a number of days in the winter. So I personally think, as far as my objectives are concerned, I would focus first on that source of revenue and see if that can make up some of the difference that we seem to lack.
Let me give you another timer. Let's give 1 more minute because I didn't give the complete landscape. We'll give each of you a little more time to respond. State statute requires sales tax revenues to be distributed 50% point of sale, 50% based on the population. So the point of sale is where the sales tax goes for automobiles, big purchases, going down the Spanish Fork, that's under state statute, because you can't buy a car online, typically you can't make the big purchases online. That's why the question was specific about what kind of retail would you propose, if any, because the costs are going to be significant for the additional growth, just the cost of infrastructure, maintaining the roads and such, and the current formula of 50% point of sale, 50% population is hardwired in the state statute, and there's very little expectation that formula will change in the near future. So I'll continue with your answer, but incorporate that allocation formula that requires cities to secure sales tax dollars.
So, I mean, if I was required, or if we were required to incorporate some sort of a commercial development, here's the thing, I don't have all the answers as far as that kind of thing goes, but there are a lot of clever and creative people up here who could lend their expertise in fleshing something like that out. I have talked to a number of residents, and there are some ideas that I actually think sound very promising. So, for example, a high-end, like a retirement community type of a development might be one way that we could generate additional revenue. People sort of tongue-in-cheek say, how about a Maverick? And while there's a lot of advantages to that, I think there are certainly environmental issues that would accompany that. So I would say that any commercial development would ideally be high yielding in terms of revenue, or as high as possible, and low impact.
Okay, thank you. To the other candidates, again, this growth that's inevitable is coming. There's going to be additional cost with it. What type of commercial development would you support, and how would you generate the revenues, given that the state statute defines sales tax revenues as 50% point of sale? That means where the sale occurs, where the product is delivered, and 50% based on the population of the city. So if you have a low density city, your population is not, it's going to be a negative in that formula, even if you have the online sales and delivery to your house.
It sounds like the senator is telling us what's coming.
No, that is what is right now. That is the landscape that when you take office, that's the landscape that you will find.
Wonderful. So for me, it comes down to the look and feel of this beautiful place that we love, right? How do we maintain that as best as we can? Especially, right now you go up into the mountains and you're seeing all of the autumn colors. That is what Woodland Hills is. It is a tight-knit, beautiful, amazing community. So how can we keep that while still meeting those financial needs going forward? Because that is one of the things that we have to look at. We have to start looking into the future to mitigate the financial burden, because we've got some big bills that are always in the future. Those are their infrastructure, water, roads. We're feeling those pains right now. As Mike said, with the water bills, there are a lot of different bills coming up. So the commercial that I would be more likely to entertain would be things that would not drastically increase the population that is coming to our city. So what does that look like? Potentially, depending on how those base areas are developed, those may look like, say, a high-end restaurant, something that is a destination point that is also not bringing in, 20 or, multi-hundreds of people every single day, right? Something that would be a destination point for people to want to come. If you think about it, the nearest real high-end restaurants in this valley, it's hard to find. Really, you're looking at maybe Orem, right? But really, you've got to go around Point of the Mountain to get a high-end, nice restaurant. Potentially maybe like a bed and breakfast. Something that does generate revenue, that can also be profitable with the population density that we have here, but really also doesn't drastically impact the feel of our wonderful city. I think personally, there's better ways that we can look at it without having to go immediately to commercial. You know, I've spoken with many people around how can we maybe have a lower or a higher density area that is for retirees. Many people love Woodland Hills, it's in their blood, and they want to not have to necessarily move off of the hill where there's too much snow. And if they had an option to retire, say in the elk field, where that is developed with beautiful walking paths, you know, little parks for grandkids, very, very outdoor, but we have options.
Senator, I'm going to resist your question. I think it's a very pertinent question. It's a good question. But I feel like it's pushing me in a direction that I don't want to go. From what I have seen and what I've heard, commercial development in the city, there isn't much we can do that's going to solve our tax burden problems. I don't want a car dealership down at the entrance to the city. We've had a citizen that looked into bringing a 7-Eleven Maverick to the city and looked into it pretty seriously, and it was just impractical. We just don't have the population. And I don't know that there would be enough sales to have the impact that we might hope for from having commercial come into the city. So although I'm open to things like that, I think it's a great thing to look into. If we can bring commercial into the city that actually adheres with the nature of the city, that sticks with the beauty that we've come to be accustomed to, I think that would be great. The retirement facility seems to me a very logical thing, but for other purposes, not necessarily for bringing in more money. While I'm open to commercial, I think we need to explore commercial. I don't think that is a good option for us as a solution to our budgetary problems.
Okay, I think we're getting close on time, aren't we, Chloe? Overall time, 45 minutes. It's 8 minutes to 8. So as a final question, state law requires financial disclosures and conflict of interest disclosures. As a state legislator, I have my own career. I serve part-time, and quite often, as an elected official, I will find myself with a conflict that is inherent in having a profession outside of my elected responsibilities. The fact that there's a conflict isn't what is challenging for citizens. It's conflicts that aren't disclosed. If they're disclosed, there's transparency. So each of you have your private businesses, your private affairs. What conflicts, if any, do you have that you would have disclosed or be required to disclose relative to being elected in the Woodland Hills? Do you have any financial conflicts or conflicts of interest that would need to be disclosed? And Mr. Lawrence, we'll start with you, and we'll go to Mr. Winder and Mr. Hilliard.
Well, sadly, that's an easy question. I am retired. I have no conflicts. This campaign that we've run entirely on our own cash, our own reserves. I guess I need to divulge that I've spent 20 years in the Air Force as a fighter pilot. I spent 20 years with the state in child support enforcement. But I have no connections with any other businesses or anything that would require that I divulge that. I am proud of the opportunity that I've had to serve my country. I'm looking forward to the opportunity to serve here in Woodland Hills. Thank you.
So is this final answer plus closing statement or?
No, this is the final question. You'll get a chance for closing statement.
Okay, all right. With respect to conflicts, that's a huge part of what I address every day. I mean, in the legal profession, we need to make sure that as a firm, we don't represent parties whose interests are adverse to our other clients. And so even to run for mayor, I had to submit a request to the board of, or the executive committee at our firm and had to get approval and make sure that there are no conflicts. So no, there are no conflicts with respect to my profession. But certainly it's an area where I'm very touchy, as any attorney is.
I guess for me, the only conflict that potentially could arise is I own a number of businesses. I am self-employed. And so I guess if for some reason, so one of my, just to give you an example, one of our businesses is myself and my business partner, we install backyard putting greens. So if we had somebody, for instance, a resident that hired our company and we installed one and it didn't go well and we had to figure out how to resolve that, that potentially, I guess, could be a conflict of interest, but that's me digging. So I do not believe there would be any. Everything that I do is fairly, actually all above board, and that we're really here to help. So what that is, thank you.
Thank you. Now, Chloe, let's do 1 minute for the closing statements, and in your closing statement, I'm gonna ask you to address a very specific topic, and that is, why are you uniquely qualified to be mayor as part of your closing statement? Mr. Winder, we'll go with you. Then we'll go with you, Mr. Hilliard. Mr. Lawrenson, you'll wrap up.
All right, well, thank you for your moderation, and thank you to everyone for being here. As far as what uniquely qualifies me, I think that as you have heard the three of us speak, there is a lot of shared vision here. There is a lot of common ground, and a good solution is a good solution. So I think that what uniquely qualifies me is the qualifications that I mentioned in my opening statement. I think that my legal background does allow me to address situations in a unique, non-confrontational way, in a way that allows others to feel heard. I also feel that it helps me understand the role of government. And so I think that does put me in a position that as much as I admire and respect Mike and Ben, I think that they don't have that background. And so anyway, thank you for the consideration.
Thank you, Mayor. I think for me, it comes down to my business experience. A lot of, and I feel that one of our primary needs in this city is an administrative position. Somebody who can manage the city in a way that drives us towards improvement and excellence. That is what I feel I bring to the table more so than my two friends here. I'm so grateful for their willingness to serve. And I know that if I'm elected, that, sorry, you're not going to get on the sidelines, gentlemen, because they have so much to offer. For me, the reason I ran for mayor and not city council was because the administrative side of the city falls on the head of the mayor, and that is where we need it. I'm also quite adept at creating and forging relationships, and we need those relationships forged with our neighboring cities. We are a very small city, and there's much we can gain through partnership and collaboration. And that's what I feel I bring. Thank you.
In the time I've been here, I've attended city council meetings regularly. I've paid attention to what's going on in the city. It's, for any of you who've been to council meetings, it can be frustrating because you sit there and have to be quiet and listen to council talk. And you may disagree. I feel like I have things to contribute. I've served on the planning commission. I have served in volunteer positions organizing people in the city. I have spent extensive time working with ordinances and helping to go over the codification process. I worked hard and many, many hours with my wife and others to serve the city. Thank you, Grant. He and I have sucked sewers together with the city sewer sucker. I think we need a manager in the city. The mayor is the manager. The mayor, I have the time.
Candidates, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. right, right away. Short break? 5 minutes? Okay, 5-minute break. And where do you place that? I guess there's one seat left. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your respect and decorum with the last mayoral debates. We're going to move to the city candidates. Right, I'm just going to hand you, starting here, you got 2 minutes to introduce yourself and make your pitch.
As most of you already know, my name is Toby Harding. I furnished a letter to every citizen listing my qualifications as I see them. Many of you had the opportunity to observe me serving as your representative for 12 years. Let me just suggest that you examine all candidates and set your own criteria as to who's going to represent you. Thank you very much.
My name is Cody Chamberlain. I'm running for city council, obviously. I live on Woodland Hills Drive, just a couple of houses up from here. And me and my wife love living up here. It's been great, especially this time of year. I work for Davies Design Build. I currently am a large-scale land planner. I currently have been planning one of the largest developments in Springville for the last 3 years. I believe that I bring a lot of experience to the council in land planning. And I believe that that the ideas that we've been implementing in Springville could be some very good things for us up here. One of those things is form-based code, which I have a lot of experience with. I have right here. This is 120 pages and hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of work that we've put into this code that we are implementing in Springville. And I believe that experience alone would help the city immensely, regardless of what we put in anywhere. I believe that that's where my experience is. So.
My eyes on, sorry. So my name is Janet Lunt. Obviously running for city council. I was just going to tell you a little bit about me because I don't know a lot of people here, but I've been married for 36 years. I have 4 adult children and then 2 teenage boys that we adopted from Haiti. My husband is the head boys basketball coach at Corner King and Draper. So he drives there every day with the boys. So they spend most of the time on the road or in the gym, and that kind of leaves me home alone. So I work full-time at GT Title. I do have a flexible schedule. However, I have an office at home, and then I have one in PG as well. I work with land, title issues. I work with developers and builders. And so I have a lot of experience and knowledge and understanding of property taxes and how they work. And like I say, a lot of land issues and things like that. One of my primary jobs at the title company is to balance the books, so to speak, to the penny every day. So as I'm funding files and purchases and doing things like that, everything has to be perfect. I prepare legal documents every day, and that's just a part of what I do. One thing about Woodland Hills is I lived here about 8.5 years, but we lived in Payson for 25 years, and I bet about 20 of those years, we would go on a Sunday drive, probably not every Sunday, but pretty close. And we would drive up Woodland Hills and dream of living here someday. And we just love this place. It's just our absolute favorite. And I'm so glad that I finally was able to fulfill that dream. I actually watched a house sit on the market for 3 years. And I watched it on the MLS, and I just kept thinking, that's my house, that's my house, that's my house. And then finally it happened, and I was able to move here. The reason I decided to run, my signs all have a hashtag on them that says Life in the Woods. This is a symbol of what I stand for. I want to preserve the life that we have here living in the woods. I moved here to have a little piece of land and to have my neighbors not quite so close to me. Anyway.
Thank you for being here tonight. My name is Doral Kinnison. I think most of you know my name and have seen me around before. I'm the one guy that's been on the council for 8 years. And sadly, I was only elected once. And so I am thrilled to have these people sitting behind me so that you get to have an election and you can elect someone to serve you. I like that. Now, my unique life, I grew up on a dairy farm in Idaho on 80 acres. We raised alfalfa, corn, pasture, silage, and it was hard work. As a toddler until I was 18, I worked on that farm. And I think milking cows, 30 of them, morning and night, 5 a.m., 5 p.m. for my young life, totally qualified me to be on the city council. Nothing could train me better than trying to convince a cow to give me milk. And my dad and I were very successful in getting 5 gallons or more a cow every day. So I love that now that I'm not doing it, but it was a great way growing up. Graduated from college, got a job in Provo, and I retired from that job, the same one, after 42 years of service. So I stick to what I start, and I loved that job. I had a good time. I am retired now. I can give all my time to the city, and over the past many years I have. I happen to love this place. Santa Quinn was burning up a few years ago. In fact, it was August of 2001, a month before 9/11, when 2 of my children's homes over there were threatened by fire. I was there, wow, I'm done already? Really? Oh, anyway, thank you for being here.
All I can say is time flies when you're having fun, okay? Now, ladies and gentlemen, you saw the preseason questions. Now we're for the main event. And so the first question, you've already seen it. What are the top 3 issues that you want to tackle that you see are the top 3 issues, 3 specific issues you're going to tackle as a member of the city council? Mr. Chamberlain, we're going to start with you. We're going to come down to Mr. Harding, and we're going to come back to the end. And Janet, you're going to be the wrap up.
Okay, so what I believe is planning, number one. I think that the reason that we are in the financial situation that we are in is because of lack of planning. I believe that's number one, because taxes is number 2, and that solves a lot of things with taxes. Taxes, when we moved here, our water bill was $25 a month, and then it went up to $125. And so for us, it was a giant leap, and I would love to be a part of the conversation to help fix that. And I think thirdly would be fire mitigation. We obviously live in a zone where there's the potential risk for fire, and I think that we have an obligation to help clear a lot of the brush and help to mitigate that fire risk. So.
In my mind, the main issue in the city is how do we maintain the ability to remain a city? We're faced with a myriad of issues. How do we get the money? How much money do we need? How do we provide for the health, safety, welfare? Do we have adequate police protection? Do we have adequate fire protection? How are we going to address all of these issues? Perhaps if I was to list 3 among all of those, it would be that we need to be financially responsible. That we have to determine how much we need to spend on what things we need. We need to have accountability to the citizens so that they clearly understand what the issues are and why the city will take as proposing certain activities. We need to be, I hate the word transparent. I think we need to be honest, give full disclosure, and not have any secrets about why or what we're doing. So the issues are, how do we remain a city? If we don't make some changes in a few years, a proposal will be made. Let's become part of Elk Ridge. Let's become part of Salem. Let's do something else, because if we don't make some changes, and those proposals will come sooner than we would like.
Thank you. Number one, I would like us to learn to like each other again. I'm a nuts and bolts guy, okay? Number two, let's fix the drainage in our city every time it rains and floods. And number three, and important to me, is maintain our volunteers. Let's keep them in mind when we're trying to run this city. I happen to be a part of this fire department in Woodland Hills, and I don't have an agenda for running for council, but I do support and will always support their needs and their feelings too about serving in the city. It's been a very difficult couple of years around here for the volunteers that service your medical calls, your fire calls. And so we need to make sure they are appropriately thanked and recognized. And for example, let's have an appreciation dinner annually for them. It was very difficult to get one last year. Drainage, I believe there's a solution. I think we just need to put our heads together and figure out how to get the culverts back under the roads and big enough so that they can, you've all seen the rainstorms and what they do to our roads and the areas in the city. I have visited residents here in key areas that have seen the flood after every rainstorm, during every rainstorm, and we need to fix that and figure out how to fix it. As far as liking each other, I really believe we can fix this. I firmly believe that we can learn that respect and we can learn to listen to each other. I don't think we listen enough, and 2 minutes is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a longer time to listen.
I actually took notes on the first round and wrote what my answers would be to those questions. So for the first one, it would be property taxes for me. And I do understand that a small part of the taxes that were charged actually comes back to Woodland Hills. A lot of it does go to the school district and for roads and other things. But when I first moved here, my property taxes were about $2,700, and now they're double. And so that is a concern for me. There are people that have lived in Woodland Hills for 20 plus years that we may be property taxing them right out of the community. If they're on a fixed income and their taxes continue to go up, that's a concern for me. So we've got to look at some solutions. One thing that was brought up in the town hall meeting about a week ago, 10 days ago, was that we did raise about $200,000 this last year in revenue from Amazon. So there are some things we can do to raise some revenue. I think we're going to have to work together as citizens to work on that. The other thing is the divisiveness. And as I've gone door to door and I've talked to a lot of people, I think there's a lot of maybe misunderstanding on things. There's so many issues where people either aren't clear over here or they're clear over there. And sometimes I think probably the truth really is more in the middle. And I think if we can go with my third one, which is transparency, but I think maybe we need to be able to get some more information out there. I feel like we've been improving on that. with the newsletter and some of the things that we've had going. It's been really good. But I know as a citizen, I've often felt like I really don't know what's going on in the city. And honestly, that's one of the reasons that I'm running is because I want to be involved. So I think if we can get the correct information out there, not the rumors, and we can talk about it together, maybe have, some more town hall meetings and some things where we can have citizens come and input their ideas so that it's not just me or us, it's all of us.
Okay, I'm going to take a little departure from the way we conducted the last debate, because each of you, I'm going to touch on what your top priority was. I'm going to ask you a specific question. So this is not a general question for each of the four of you. Ms. Lund, I'm going to start with you. Property taxes are defined by the Utah State Constitution. The property must be taxed at its fair market value. We have a 45% residential property exemption. About 72% of all property taxes fund education, and the city's portion is a very, very small piece of that. So what as a city council member would you do to change property taxes where it's hardwired in the Constitution, majority goes to education, and the city really has no ability to change those rates that account for well over 95% of the taxes that are charged on the property?
Yeah, but I'm in title and escrow, so I know how this works, right? So there's a mill rate for each neighborhood or each city. And because our budget is proposed each year and our budget needs and what we need are presented to the county, then the county determines what our mill rate is. And what that means is that they take the value of our home and then they give us the discount that he's speaking of. But then it's also calculated by the mill rate, which is figured out to generate enough money to cover the city budget. So if we can work on the budget and find some other means of revenue, then our mill rate will go down. And what that means is that I really don't anticipate our property taxes going down. I don't. But a couple of years ago, our taxes went up. Mine went up $500 in 1 year. That was painful. So if we can help to keep them from going up too high, and maybe get them to level out a little bit. I mean, if they could go down, that would be amazing, but I've never really seen them go down. They just go up every year. It's just kind of part of it. But I think if we can generate some other means of revenue so that we're not so dependent for our budget on the taxes, then our taxes won't continue to go up.
Take follow-up with you. Each one I'm going to give a follow-up.
Okay.
With the mayor candidates, we talked about generating other revenues. Sales tax is a primary revenue source that cities can generate. Property taxes is a very, very small part of the budget. It's a very small part of the overall property tax. The increases have been based on increased property values, the assessed valuation. So what would you do to increase revenues for the city?
That's a hard one, and I'm not going to decide this one on my own, but I mean, there are ideas. They've already been talked about a little bit. I've talked to a lot of people about this. There are ideas for a retirement community, things like that. All the things like that come with problems. There's been some talk of, if you look at the master plan down at the bottom, it's not zoned for commercial, but it could be. It's not zoned that right now. It could be a doctor's office or a dentist office, something like that. I don't really love that idea. I don't want a lot more traffic up here. We already have a school zone that we have to drive past every day, the light and all the traffic. It's usually right when I'm trying to go to work, and it's a lot. So I think that's the toughest issue we have in our city right now, is how do we generate more revenue? I think a lot of citizens have a lot of good ideas. I know there are things that we can do, but I think, if we could have like a 55 and older community where people could live, I think that would be.
Thank you. Great answers. Mr. Kynaston.
Yes.
You said that drainage, we need to fix the drainage in Woodland Hills. That's a very expensive proposition when you're talking about tearing out roads and putting in culverts. How would you plan to pay for it?
Well, since I have been in this city, I have participated personally several times at several residences all over the city and cleaned their culverts. At first, we were using fire truck and we were blowing out culverts, and they stayed clean for a while. That is a continuing effort I think we need to do, and I really believe volunteers can do that. The big problem we have is that the culverts we do have are plugged. And we need to clean them out, and we need to put a screen on the upper hillside of them and keep them clean. And many of our residents are a little elderly and they can't do it. And we need to step up and try and help them. And like I said, I've done that several times and it was successful, and it's hard work. I also believe that some of these culverts are too small and we need to replace them. I don't know how to fund it yet. We have to look at that. And it seems like anymore now, when we go through our budget, we need to cut something to do something like this. And so there are things that we have to measure. I would suggest, and I might not be popular, but I'd suggest less salt on the roads for a year and use that money to pay for a pipe under a driveway. But these decisions are hard, and government isn't us telling you what we're going to do. It's participation. We need you telling us what you'd like us to consider. And I need citizen input, and I need input from my friends behind me, and from the mayor and those others that contribute time to the city.
All because your second one was, well, you talked about lighting, but drainage and volunteers. As Woodland Hills grows and changes, can it maintain its approach of providing services to the citizens essentially through volunteers, or should there be a different model?
I really appreciate that question. We just went to a couple of different fire departments looking at fire trucks that we're considering purchasing. And those fire departments are paying their no longer volunteers to be on their department. Midway up there in Wasatch County are paying $50 an hour for their people to do fire service and medical service. We cannot afford that. Nor is it what I want. I don't want to pay firefighters. These guys that work in this city are like no other city you've ever heard of. They 24/7, they will show up and help you. And I've seen this, and our calls have tripled and quadrupled this past year, and they show up anyway. It's an incredible group. And there are other volunteers in the city that contribute time as well, as you heard this evening from some of our speakers. We need to avoid paying those guys because we can't afford them. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Chamberlain, you're on the hot seat.
Here we go.
I told you this was going to be a little different model. So you cited your top two things. You held up a document, said this was several hundred or $100 and some thousand for planning, and suggested that should be a model that would be adopted by Woodland Hills. And you talked about taxes. How would you think, and you said we need to cut taxes. So the first question is, how would you go about as a city council member getting support from the rest of the city council to spend the money to develop the document? Because I presume that's going to be rather expensive for Woodland Hills. How would you do that?
So that was
And how would you pay for it?
perfect. Yeah. So that document was paid for by the developers exclusively. So right now the market in Utah is crazy, and there is a lot of energy in Utah. And I say we use that energy. We use that energy to pay for things that we need.
Well, now, let me interrupt you for just a moment.
Okay.
Because if you're talking about developers paying for that, then you're suggesting that Woodland Hills needs to grow and developers need to come in and pay for that development. Is that your platform?
Absolutely, yeah. So I believe that eventually Woodland Hills is going to develop, whether we like it or not. Unfortunately, that's the truth. And what we have the opportunity to do right now is work with the developer to create something great that we all love. And well, I shouldn't say that we all love. There will always be disagreements. But we as a city have a say in what we put down there. The state just came out with a law where municipalities cannot tell a developer if it's anything above a single family home, they can't tell a developer how the building is supposed to look, what materials they use, what color it's supposed to be. They can't regulate anything on it really, other than the setbacks, heights, basic stuff like that. And so what developers are inclined to do is come to a city and say, okay, if you would like to tell us exactly what you want here, then we love that input and we will pay for this development agreement, which that's a part of the code, is the development agreement between the developer and the city. And so that's how I propose to pay for it.
Okay. And the second one is on taxes, and I will forewarn you that I've spent 40-some years as a CPA. I've chaired the Revenue and Tax Committee, and I've drafted about 80% of the current tax code. So my question.
Oh, boy.
I just wanted to forewarn you that there may be a follow-up question as there was with this one. Okay?
Okay, let's go.
So, bring it on. So, yeah, quick setup. You said taxes were the biggest issue. What taxes would you cut and how would you go about cutting them? And then if you're going to cut taxes, what specific services would you cut with those taxes, with the reduction in revenue?
Okay, so Davis Ranch is the development. It's obviously the ranch that's right to our east. That's 531 acres, and so that is a lot of traffic. That's if it's just 1 unit per acre, that's 531 units.
Specific to what taxes would you cut? You said taxes were an issue. What taxes
Right.
would you cut?
So I would cut property taxes. And-
What city property tax would you cut? And how would you cut it?
Sorry, maybe I'm misunderstanding.
When you say you cut property taxes are imposed by the county, by school districts, by special service districts. The city has a very, very small piece, which doesn't amount in the overall property tax very much. We have that discussion with this one. So what?
So in my understanding, the more people you have, the more taxes you can bring in. So my understanding is that if we develop and we put in commercial, that we will be able to cut property taxes because we have more people to share the load. Is that right? Because again, I'm not
the candidate.
okay. But I also recognize that I don't have that experience that you do. So in my opinion, I would go out and I'd find people like you, CPAs, who understand that a little bit better than I do to actually get the question answered. But from my perspective as a developer, that the more people we have coming in, the more likely we can get commercial, which does bring in tax revenue. So we can cut taxes with that. I know we can.
So your proposal would be that there has to be some commercial development, expanding the tax base from the city services.
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay, that's what I was trying to get to.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Harding, you said the ability to remain a city was your top priority, and you mentioned police, fire, etc. How would you plan on accomplishing that, and how would you pay for the services if they're not volunteer? How would you pay for them to ward off merging with, say, Lower Basin or Elk Ridge or wherever?
I think the first step is to have a priority-based budget in which the mayor and the council reach some agreement, and maybe word is unity, on what are the most essential services that are needed, and distinguish between those items that are most essential and those that we could probably do without for extended periods of time. I think that will accomplish several things. It will give some ease to the increase, to the amount that we need to increase property taxes to provide services. And it will also give the citizens a complete idea of what the council and the mayor really believes are important. The second step to that would be to confirm with the citizens that what the mayor and the citizen and the council decides are what they really want. The second thing is something that I didn't do very good when I was mayor. And that is that there are a myriad of grants that are available to cities. I think a way to increase revenues, which will increase our viability as a city, is to thoroughly explore every opportunity to exploit any grants that are available through the federal government, through the county, through the state. And I think we can do a much better job than that than we're currently doing. And I admit better than we did when I was mayor. I think that addresses the issue.
Thank you.
Do I get a follow-up?
You've done very well.
Well, I would say that the best thing I could do is go to my senator and ask him to change the law so that everyone else can get more money. Our senator,
Touche, your senator is?
I don't know.
Oh, it's Senator Mike McKell.
Good. And since you have a better relationship than I do, please express my views. Thank you.
Okay, for each member of the council, since you're standing, you'll get this question.
Oh, I thought I was making more questions. Thank you for not.
Well, this is the next question.
Okay, good.
Okay. The legislature recently, we talked about the legislature and what your senator did to you.
Oh, I didn't say that. Come on, let's be honest.
So the legislature passed a law this past session requiring cities to adopt ordinances on accessory dwelling units and looking at higher density housing because of the what is called a housing crisis, an affordable housing crisis in Utah. So my question is multi-part. Do you support accessory dwelling units? Ladies and gentlemen, those are like a mother-in-law apartment, renting out your basement, renting out an apartment over your garage, whatever, something different than duplexes. Okay? And second, what should Woodland Hills do to provide affordable housing and to address the housing crisis that exists in the state of Utah today?
Let me see if I can address that in some order.
Well, the first is the accessory dwelling units.
Right. I believe that the city of Woodland Hills should comply with all state laws. I recently spoke with a citizen who I deeply respect, and I mentioned the issue of affordable housing. And the response was, disregard the law, we don't want it, and the council shouldn't do anything about it. I think that's a totally inappropriate answer. I think we should comply with the law. Currently, there have been some changes in those things that you discussed. A review of my review of the code indicates that our provisions are not currently compliance with the new regulation. My suggestion is that it to be referred to the planning commission, and that we should have public input, and that the public should have a significant input in how we implement the state law so that we're in compliance. Now, did I answer all the questions, or
Well, it's up to you.
well, you tell me if I did, if not, I'll answer more.
I think you're doing just fine, but I'm not the candidate.
Well, I hope not.
We'll go next to Mr. Tyneson.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're probably talking about me, Toby. I am so concerned.
No, I'm grateful that you're going to help me do my culverts.
Oh, I will do that. So I just read House Bill 82 and thank you. No, it is the law and I want to obey the law, but I'll tell you, we've got to do some work to figure out how to do this. I found 15 concerns through that law. Do you know that if you rent to somebody, that the city needs to set up some inspection to come into your home and make sure that your home is qualified and stays qualified to rent to people? We're going to worry about the size of your windows that they exit from. We're going to worry about parking spaces. We need to know if your septic plugs up and you've got a renter. I mean, there are so many things in this law that scares the heck out of me. I do not want to inspect your homes to see if you're abiding by all the rules that our city is going to set up for you to have a renter. Now, we currently have rentals in the city. And I have no problem with that because I am not going to enforce our current ordinance that says no rentals. That's what it says. I am going to stay out of your business. That's what I would do. Now, but not everybody feels the same, but we're going to have to allow you to have rentals. But I still don't want to come into your homes and check everything inside your homes to see if you can have a renter and if you can keep a renter years down the road. It just bugs me. And I don't know how cities do this. They're just in your home a lot. I mean, I could go through the 15 items on the list I wrote from that House bill that we have to work out. And we will, because there are smart people behind me and on the council that will help me do this. When we tried to change the ordinance a year or two ago, I worked with the council and we didn't do it. I had 22 reasons not to, but it was a difficult situation.
Okay, your time expired, but you
I'll
did.
give you my 15 items.
Well, if I were debating, sir, I would talk about the building codes and public safety and why access and egress from a basement apartment, why that window has to be a certain size and it has to have public safety, why plumbing and other things for public health is a requirement. But I'm not debating this.
I want to debate it because how are you going to handle, we're on septic up here. You know, how are you going to prove that everybody's septic?
I'm not. But I'm having fun moderating. Okay?
We love you here. Thank you.
Okay. Let's go to Ms. Lund. Because I'm going to come back to you on the affordable housing piece that you didn't touch on.
So Doral and I are good friends, but we totally disagree. I would approve the accessory apartments. I actually have a rental property. It's a cabin. It's up by Yellowstone. It's awesome. But we are in the process of licensing right now, and we had to jump through some hoops. We had to have our sewer tested. We had to make sure that our water, we had to have a water test to make sure that our water was good. There are a few requirements. It wasn't that bad. We will have to have an inspection. I do have a mother-in-law apartment in my home, and I don't want renters. I don't think I ever will want renters in my basement, but it does have a separate entrance, has a separate parking, has all the things. If I ever got in a bind or if I was retired and needed the income, I would like to be able to rent it out legally. So I think we would jump through the hoops and do the things. It doesn't have to be super invasive. You can just get a license. They come and do a safety inspection. If you're on a septic tank, we make sure, you know, that your septic tank can handle it, some of those kinds of things. So I actually would approve them. There are people that are already doing it in our city illegally. And I think as a city, we have a responsibility to make sure that it's done right and that we protect the people that are renting as well as the homeowner.
Thank you. Mr. Chamberlain.
Okay, so first off, it's Utah state law, so we have to follow that. I believe HB 82 tells cities that they have to allocate 75% of their municipality to allowing auxiliary dwelling units. And so I think we need to do that, state law. If it wasn't state law, I still believe that it is up to the property owner. Another part of that is affordable housing. We have a responsibility to our youth and to our elderly to provide housing for them. And the reason that the state had to step in was because we are not providing enough units per year to meet the demand. I think we're 40,000 units short every year, and we're not catching up. And I think from the state's point of view and from what I've heard from other developers is that if the state doesn't step in, then the federal government has to step in. Because at that point, the state isn't taking care of their people. So I believe that affordable housing has a place in Utah. What that means is different in every municipality. Yeah, that's my take on it.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to go back to Mr. Tennyson. We'll start with you. How should building codes be enforced? Oh, wait, no, we didn't get you. You were just sitting here quietly. Well, you were just sitting there quiet. Okay. Accessory dwelling units and affordable housing, the housing crisis. What's your platform?
Not on AD.
What's that? Oh, okay, so I'm right. Oh, no, my wife here said, hey, you didn't get a chance to go. Thank you, Mr. Henderson. Hey, it's getting late, it's been a long day. We're gonna listen to you. Mr. Henderson, how do you?
Why don't we both speak together? We both want to obey the law.
And Mike. Okay, so how would, as a city council member, how should Woodland Hills enforce the building codes? That's a kind of related to the affordable housing unit. Accessory dwelling units.
Yeah. First of all, we need to educate you on what the ordinances are, if you seem to misunderstand one of them. A lot of times, I know when I moved into the city, I carried on and was a citizen here, and I didn't know any of the ordinances. And that has changed, but I would enforce the ordinances through levels of steps. The first thing would be to inform, and there are some infractions in the city, and I guess there always will be. But most of the people, when you educate them, they want to obey the law, and we don't have the problems. But if we need to enforce, then I really think some of them need to be enforced. And we would warn it first, and maybe step up with a letter with a deadline and so on, and keep stepping that up until we're clear to a lien perhaps on the property. I like to avoid that. I'd rather treat you as my neighbor than my enemy. And so I am one that is very concerned about how we enforce ordinances and how we urge our citizens to obey the crazy laws that we set for you. Be aware, city government has more impact on your life than county, state, or federal. That's what they taught us in the first class I went to when I elected the city council, is you have more impact on people's lives than any other entity of government. So I take that responsibility as very serious and humbling, actually, and thinking I know more about how you should act than I really do, because it's tough.
Let's go to Mr. Harden. How would you enforce city codes?
The city of Woodland Hills has tried various sundry ways of trying to enforce the codes. Several years ago, we had volunteer. Well, the first time that I was involved with enforcing the city code, it was my responsibility as a council member to enforce the code. So one of my most unpleasant experiences that I can remember is having to go to citizens and say, your driveway needs to be paved. You have 6 months to do it, or your horses are in the corral in your front right yard. That's not appropriate. You've got old cars in your yard, and that's against the code. And I can tell you, I did not receive any indication that the people that I dealt with were going to vote for me the next time. We then went to a procedure where we had a situation where we had a former police officer who was volunteered to enforce that is that there was some reluctance at that time on the council to follow up on his citations for various and sundry reasons. So we would comment and cite people and write letters, and the city council at that time decided it was not prudent to follow up on those matters. We currently have a paid enforcement officer who is supposed to do it. I'm sorry, that is not the correct word. We have a city employee who has a responsibility to enforce that. None of those approaches have been completely successful. I would like to know what the real solution is.
Thank you, so do I. Mr. Chamberlain.
And it's my understanding that we have an enforcement officer who's, I guess he's just a city, he is a city employee who is supposed to be enforcing those laws. If he isn't able to do it, then I think there are other options within the city. I would hate to be the one going door to door saying, hey, you are not within compliance. So, you got me second guessing what I'm doing up here. But I think we have someone to do that, and I think we should continue to do that. If it's not working, then let's look at it and try and figure it out.
What specifically, what would you do with enforcement? Is it fines? Is it liens? How would you approach that?
If there was I think warnings first, and then fines, and then possibly liens. But I hate again to go anywhere negative with that. So
Tough question.
yeah.
I hate this question.
So I'm doing my job.
Yes, I think you're having way too much fun. I tend to be not a big government person. I don't like big government. So I'm a little bit of a rebel. I think that's why I live here. I think that's probably where most of us, a lot of us live here. So having said that, I do think that there are some codes that we definitely 100, 1000% have to enforce. Our building codes, some of those things. I think if I'm doing something that's causing harm to my neighbor, or is doing something that is bringing down property values, things like that, then it definitely, or if it's a nuisance, if I've got a rooster that won't shut up, then I think that those codes have got to be enforced. I would start with letters. Whoever the person is, I actually know who the person is in the city. I think if you can talk to the resident and try to work out a resolution, I think that's always the best. If they're not willing, I think it would have to be a stepped up approach. But having said that, I don't like big government. I don't like the adversarial relationship, and I don't want to be the one doing it.
Okay. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, given the lateness of the hour, we're going to go to closing arguments from each of the candidates. Corey, if you give them a minute and a half, 90 seconds each. Mr. Harding, we're going to start with you. Then we'll go to Mr. Chamberlain, then Ms. Monk. Kind of, we'll just go right down the line, and that will conclude the evening.
Let me say, in case there's some misinterpretation of what I said, I think our current ordinance enforcement officer is a very fine gentleman. I think he's doing the very best he can, given the support that he's received. I would hate for anybody to infer that I'm maligning his efforts in trying to do the very best job he is. Most of you know me. If I were trying to extol my virtues, I think that would be futile. Let me just say, you have a sheet and I'll have extra ones that list my qualifications. If they fit what you think is a qualified candidate, I request your support. Decide for yourself who you think is the most qualified and act appropriately, but be sure and vote so that your voice is heard.
I definitely agree with that. You know, I'm so excited to be a part of Woodland Hills and even just a part of the conversation of Woodland Hill, of what Woodland Hills can be, how we can make Woodland Hills better, and hopefully part of the solution on some of the things that we don't get along with or that we don't agree on. We have such an opportunity to develop in the right way. I believe I'm the best candidate to bring that experience to Woodland Hills. I believe that with my experience with form-based code, we have an opportunity to have a say with what happens in our city. I'm grateful that a lot of you have been so kind to me. This is my first time running for city council. And it's been a great honor to meet a lot of you and hear the concerns that you have. And ultimately, I want to represent all of you, however I can, to best build Woodland Hills up, so that we don't have to be worried about taxes or the culverts or whatever it may be. I'd love to be a part of the solution.
So for me, I just, you know, whether you vote for me or someone else, I just think that we need to vote for someone that loves the community so much that they're willing to give up all of their time and talents to work with you to improve it and to make it and to keep it the great place that we love. I think we've got to stop dwelling on the past. I think some of the things that happened in the past that we're unhappy about are very divisive. I think it's time to move forward. It's time to plan, it's time to budget, it's time to save for our future. It's time to move forward in a positive manner. If we have to grow, if we have to have some of those growth things that a lot of us, you know, aren't super thrilled about, we need to work together and make sure it happens in a good way and the way that we want it to happen, and not where, you know, something from Salem is encroaching on us and giving us way too much traffic. I think, you know, what we have here needs to be preserved and managed, and we need to look out for each other, and we need to try and get some of that spirit and unity back that we had right after the fire, when we all worked together and sandbagged together and gave service. And so I would love to see, we have a lot of needs in our community. I'd love to see some more service projects, maybe where we can come together and build some of that unity.
First of all, I really appreciate these people behind me, and I'll never look at them the same way again. You can't believe the stress this puts on my friends and the three for mayor. It's a great experience. I'm kind of an open book. My thoughts just are there, and you know me, and you have some hard choices. I like these guys behind me too. I have no secret agenda. I want to represent the citizens. I do have opinions on things, but they are less important to me than your opinions that I like to listen to. I'd like to keep my attention on public safety. If the new mayor grants that, I would like to stay after that if elected. I would like to keep our chipper program running. I think that is just really critical. And my goal would be that 100% of our citizens would vote. Then we would really know that you've chosen the people that you want to serve you. I've proven in the past that I've thought certain ways very strongly, and I love public hearings, and I've changed my mind listening to public hearings, and I respect that. I also respect greatly our planning commission, and we have committees that are functioning very well. And I would urge the new mayor to keep those functioning. And again, I really appreciate you all being here tonight. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes tonight's program. The one thing that you can do is exercise your franchise. Brave men and women have given ultimate sacrifice for each one of us
be able to cast a vote in a representative democracy. Get out and vote. Thank you very much.